Good afternoon. We'll get started. Okay. I'm Shigeru Miyagawa. I'm Senior Associate Dean for Open Learning and Professor of Linguistics. I'm here to introduce Woodie Flowers. But before I do that, I want to remind you that after Woodie's talk at 3:30, there will be a reception just outside for you to finish this festival. Okay, so I'm very pleased and honored to introduce Woodie Flowers as our afternoon keynote speaker. I've been a fan of Woodie for many years, so it's a real thrill for me to be able to do this. Woodie is a Paparazzo Professor Emeritus of Mechanical Engineering. After receiving his bachelor's degree from Louisiana Tech University, he came to MIT to obtain his master's and PhD degrees. He has been a member of the National Academy of Engineering since 1994. He's a fellow of both the American Association for the Advancement of Science and the American Society of Mechanical Engineering. Woodie has been recognized with many awards. Just to name a couple, there's a long list. Just to name a couple, he was awarded the MIT McVicker Faculty Fellowship for extraordinary contributions to undergraduate education. He also received the American Society of Mechanical Engineering's Spira or Spira Award as an outstanding design educator. Woodie's work is focused on the creative design process and product development systems. He helped to create MIT's renowned course, Introduction to Design. He and his wife, Margaret, live in Weston, and I know that he and his wife are amazing nature photographers. So please help me to welcome Woodie.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Nerd epistemology, but first, Margaret and I love seeing animals in wonderful places. This is one of her images of king penguins on South Georgia Island in the Southern Ocean. The Southern Ocean is really big and really beautiful. These tabular icebergs are huge. In this image, for example, there are 21 6-foot span albatrosses or petrels. So the scale of that wave is probably bigger than this building. Kodak Alley on Antarctica Peninsula is stunning. The penguins are plentiful and wonderful to watch. Madagascar, lemur, and her baby. These are the leaping guys, and they do really amazing things. Go see them if you can. This is a Parsons chameleon. This is a satanic leaf gecko, incredibly bizarre little animal. American oyster catchers in the Galapagos. Red-billed tropic bird in the Galapagos. Ghost crab, same place. Arctic fox near Churchill, Manitoba. Snowy owl, same place. Polar bear, same place. A booted racket-tailed hummingbird in the high Andes in Ecuador. And this is a long-tailed sylph hummingbird. Stunningly beautiful, small, fast animal. Near Iguazu Falls in Brazil, a caiman with butterfly eyebrows. The butterflies land to harvest liquid from the eyes. A pair of toucans trading food. The very elusive resplendent quetzal in Costa Rica. The red-eyed tree frog in Costa Rica. Iguana, Peru, Upper Amazon. One of my wife's mood images from Upper Amazon. Hudson, they're strange, primitive birds, same place. Macaws, beautiful, beautiful birds. And in our backyard in Weston, a tufted titmouse and a grackle coming into the feeder. So, back to the topic. Non sequitur nails it from time to time. I hope you can read that the short line goes to the more complex answers. I think entirely too many are going the other way. In fact, there seems to be evidence that we adults have abandoned the concept of truth, and if you lose truth, things like liberty and pursuit of happiness, not so much. So it's really important that we not do that, and I believe that nerd epistemology is a good antidote to losing truth. So I have several abstract and super simple models to help think about that concept. Now, I've been influenced by Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, really important book. He got a Nobel Prize for teaching us that we are irrational. Incredible book by Jonathan Haidt, Righteous Minds. He does things like talks about the evolutionary biology of morality. And he teaches very effectively that humans are pre-wired for certain things. Daniel Gilbert, fun little book that's an easy read. He teaches that we don't listen to one another. Wonderful little survey from the New Yorker about a year ago. Why facts don't change our mind. There's no doubt that that's true. So, to the students, we adults have created a world that is changing faster than we are willing to accept. We adults have made a mess of our relationship with one another and with the planet. So the next few generations have a lot to fix, and I think we have an ethical obligation to try to help with that. Now, by epistemology, I mean, just how do you know what you think you know? An important question that not many people think about. So let's start with a visualization experiment. Let's imagine that on one side we have the universe, and on the other side we have the human mind. Now, the universe is really big. I mean, it is so big that we can't even imagine the numbers that we use to describe it. No human can imagine 1 billion. No human can imagine the velocity of light. And when you combine billions of light years, you obviously are describing something that is way outside what we can handle. Likewise, age. The universe is really old. And it's everywhere. It's ubiquitous, despite the fact that we think that there's 90% of it that we can't find yet. So it's a really big deal, and it's perfect and it's causal. It is epistemologically perfect. Mother Nature applies all of her rules all the time. And by contrast, the stuff that we humans have done is really tiny. I mean, if an outside thing tried to find the human mind, the results of the human mind in our universe, they'd probably never find it. It's also really new. 1 million versus billions. Very local. We've never been out there. We're right here. And it's really quite varied. And as I said earlier, it's irrational. Now, the human minds have some wonderful things. Love, empathy, creativity, passion, happiness. Lots of really nice stuff. And the more you learn, the more you can be in awe of the universe. And we've done a pretty good job of looking at the universe and coming to understand it. We've even turned our understanding of the universe back on us so that we understand ourselves more. So the human minds are able to understand things, able to invent things, to predict things. Think about, we built a rocket and sent it billions of miles in space for 14 years, and it found the comet and it touched it. Now, we didn't do that because we had some vague approximate knowledge of the mechanics of motion. We nailed it. So we understand a lot of stuff, and we've been able to use that knowledge in wonderful ways. We've been able to fix lots of things. Were it not for our creativity and intervention in disease, we all probably would not be here. But we were the product of evolution. And evolution wasn't designed to make us happy now. Human chauvinism is a major part of what's in our brain, kind of pre-wired. Imagine that in my fingernail, there's a DNA molecule in a subatomic particle, and that molecule has some 6 billion little tiny creatures on it. Do you think it would be a reasonable argument that I said that what those little tiny creatures think intervenes in the universe that we know to change the laws of the universe? No. But we humans seem to think that that's true. Tribalism, really powerful force. Mysticism, if we don't understand it, we make something up. Lust and abusive power. DNA rewarded that sort of behavior. Selfishness. So let's think about a space in which there are things on one end of the vertical axis and people on the other. Facts versus opinions. In the facts about things quadrant, that's where the laws of the universe exist, and that's where something like a machine, it's easy to imagine, it always behaves according to the laws of the universe. If we look at the facts about people, that's how we know about our thinking and about our learning. And we've come to fill out that quadrant really pretty well. When it comes to opinions and people, things like ethics and beauty, more complex things live there. In opinions about things, that's where wishful thinking about physics lives. And if alternative facts could exist, they'd be there. So stay out of that. Don't go there. But we're doing pretty well, as I just said, in the facts about things, and we are getting better in learning about ourselves and how we think. We have a lot to do in the beauty and ethics and politics and religion quadrant. And we're maybe better at ignoring that other quadrant. So to some extent, you could look at that and say, look, understand, learn about nature, understand, learn about self, understand, learn about humanity. And if you develop truth and knowledge in this facts about things quadrant, then maybe you can morph that up into these other more complex quadrants, and that would become wisdom. So that's the core part of my argument about nerd epistemology. There's some good stuff that can come from understanding a very causal world. Now, we have a lot of barriers to getting there. Daniel Kahneman does a wonderful job of talking about fast brain and slow brain. And we all think that our fast brain, our intuitive brain, our primitive brain is really kind of in the background, and our deliberative, contemplative brain is running the show. But it's not. Right now, I wave my hands like this because my fast brain said to do it. And I'm looking at you, and you're looking at me, and it's all fast brain dominated. So Kahneman teaches very effectively that we got it all backwards, that fast brain is running the show, and contemplative brain is kind of in the background. We just had a fast brain election in this country. So one of the things that's important about fast brain is that it's hidden. Most people have no idea what's driving their decision processes. Metacognition is not their strong suit. So it's only through awareness and metacognition can we learn to think about our own thinking and understand and brighten the fast brain. So the pre-wired notions that come to us through evolution include things like being attracted to other human beings, and that can result in empathetic love, or it can be really bad stuff. There's an anger module in there, and that can result in fixing things or destroying things. There's tribalism, really powerful thing, and that means help us. To some people, it means kill them. So we have to use intellect to recognize what's happening in our own brain and select which way we want to go. And I don't think humanity is going to get anywhere unless it starts doing that, because we have evolutionary baggage that's driving us in the wrong direction. If we do it well, we become gracious professionals. So everyone thinks that about critical thinking as the way to make sure that you're really educated. It's the Holy Grail. And for the most part, we think of it as you write a check for $250,000 and you give it to a small rural college where there's a professor and 4 people, and you write essays and get critiqued on the essays. I'm not complaining about that model. It seems to work. However, I think there are some other models. And one of them, I think, is design. Design process, when you go from ideas to a thing, you know it's not a simple linear process. You know that you go through iterative things. You go back and forth. You change your mind. So in the process, you go crossing this human mind, universe, boundary back and forth. I think that's a really important thing because in going from an idea to a product, for example, you go from completely free, unbounded, you can believe 6 impossible things before breakfast, and that's fine, to the point where you're doing wholly constrained imagination. You're predicting what Mother Nature is going to do. The laws of the universe are going to slap you and make sure you do it right. That process, I think, is rich example of critical thinking. And it's not red marks on an essay that directs you back. It's Mother Nature slapping you on the butt and saying, that's not right. So I think you learn in that process, for example, that being right does not make you persuasive. And you learn that being persuasive does not make you right. Now, I'm sure all of you who have been in a team probably have seen really good ideas that never come out because the person doesn't communicate well. You've probably seen a person that is very persuasive but dominates and has bad ideas. Both those are really bad. You have to push both sides of the balance forward. So let me talk some about education, and then I'll come back to MIT education and about MIT-ish education. Now, I've been influenced by the book written by the speaker this morning. Carl has written kind of a how-to, or why and how-to manual for faculty and administrators. Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, makes it very clear that ability is not fixed. Mindset is really important. Angela Duckworth, grit, perseverance is probably more important than intellect. Some of our faculty here in Sloan are pointing out that things are changing very rapidly and what you need to know is very different. Very strong, similar argument by a former MIT graduate who is now the president of Northeastern University. Very big changes are coming. I think it's really clear that every student must be a real student of learning, not just a casual student, but actually work on learning how to learn, because we don't wake up one morning and know how to do it. You have to learn that too, and it can give you a real big advantage. The National Academy has done lots of studies, big changes, 50% more failures for passive lectures, et cetera. Science Magazine says that we have an ethical obligation to respond. So did Carl Weissman this morning. So I wrote a book chapter 20 years ago called New Media's Impact on Education Strategies. It's available free. If you Google, you can find it. I stand by what I said, except for my absolutely wildly optimistic predictions about how quickly things were going to change. So, slide from about 10 years ago. I think we need to stop lecturing, outsource training, and start mentoring. And I am influenced by wise hockey players like Wayne Gretzky, who said, skate to where the puck will be, not where it has been. The education world tends to look at where the puck used to be. And paradoxically, some of the Ayn Rand devotees now need to listen to some of the things that she said, because you cannot ignore the consequences of ignoring reality. And I believe that unless you align your aspirations with the laws of the universe, you will fail. I think that's as close to true as anything I can say today. And at some point, I think you have to confess that anti-science is pro-stupid. So I also believe that balance is important. A poet who learns Mother Nature's laws likely becomes a better poet. Conversely, a technologist who learns poetry probably becomes a better technologist. So there's a TEDx talk by me out there that you can find that contains some of this argument. I believe that education and training are different, that training and education, that training will be outsourced to machines, and that education must be rebalanced and redistributed. Looking at the first one, we often talk about them as the same. I think it's clear that they do overlap, but they're quite different. For example, I think learning calculus is training, while learning to think using calculus is education. Learning a language is training, but learning to communicate in any language requires education. Learning CAD software, training. Design, education. I also think it's pretty clear that free education is nonsense. It is clear to me, however, that low marginal cost training is important and is coming. We need to take advantage of it. There's a lot of discussion about so-called T-shaped education, where you learn a little about a lot and a lot about a little. It's not enough for me. I think tree-shaped education is probably the way to do it, where the trunk is what I call true education, and maybe the limbs on one side are training about things, on the other side training about people, and it's a lot of codified information that should be filled in the branches of the tree. Lots of things that you need to know, and they're really important, but it's clear that we all would have different limbs of different lengths with different labels. But in the middle, creative, critical thinking, wise, ethical, empathetic, integrative thinking, design, research techniques, doing things with experts and with colleagues. Teamwork is really important. Modeling and estimation, very high order things to learn. Visual thinking is really important. Grit and mindset are important. So maybe then worrying about what's in the tree limbs, we think about making sure that a person has a self-image that includes knowing, for example, that they can do something that's really hard. They can do something creative, do something new, own time, with others, for others. Lead as needed. I don't think it makes sense to say we're going to train leaders. I think it's appropriate to educate people to lead when it's appropriate for them to try to lead. Do something unpopular. You need to know what that feels like. And do something that's ethically complex. You're almost guaranteed to run into an ethically complex situation in the first year of your profession. You need to think about and know how to deal with it. I think everybody should make something beautiful. Some of us struggle harder than others to make beautiful things, but everybody needs to be able to do it. Because it's really clear that during students' lifetime, productivity, human productivity is likely to go up, but it also seems clear that the part of that that's uniquely human is likely to go down. So it's probably true that everybody here wants to be wanted, needed, appreciated. In order to do that, you must do something for society. So that will be hard, but the much more subtle and sophisticated thing that you have to be able to do is pull at least a dozen others with you. Because unless you want to live in a land where there's a small group of haves and a huge number of have-nots, then you're going to have to help balance the scales. So remember that the training is the commodity piece. It's the education that conveys comparative advantage. So you need to outsource as much as you can to machines. Let the machines do the commodity work and leave more room in your life for real education. Technology can be a helping hand rather than a hostile takeover. So training, it seems very clear to me that AI is going to take over as tutors from humans. We had this beautiful romantic notion of what a tutor is all about. I think it's going to become more like this. And Alexa is not only going to control the faucets in your house or whatever, Alexa, especially when coupled with visual stuff, is going to be able to do lots of things that tutors used to be able to do, and they're going to be custom for you. They're going to know that Woodie's dyslexic and hyper and HDAT and all kinds of things, and be able to present things in a way that will help me consume them. Oh, that's going to be expensive. We can't do that. Late last century, there was a wonderful study that pointed out that 600,000 college freshmen take calculus every year, 250,000 fail. What? If each one of those is worth $2,000, that's $500 million every year for one course at one level. The opportunity cost of bad education is way too high, even the direct accounting of that stuff. Rebalanced and redistributed, you know, we have chopped up our lives into times you're playing versus when you're in school and you're in college, then your career. All that stuff's got to get blurred. It's really clear that there was a time when lifelong education was a luxury. It's clearly a necessity now. So you have to do it. It's also clear that it has to be balanced. You can't make uniquely human contributions unless you know what those are. So 10 years, 20 years from now, uniquely human is going to be different, a narrower subset, and I recommend that all the young people in the audience specifically focus on making sure you can still do that, because that's what society is going to want to reward you for doing. Now, MIT education, I'll focus on 2 engineering courses, design courses in mechanical engineering. For 2007, which used to be 270, I'll focus mostly on kind of history, and 2009 is an example, an exemplar of true education. This started a long time ago for me. In 1970, my hair was a different color and much more abundant than it is now. And we made slides because you used simple software and had lots of fonts and lots of colors, and you sent them off, and 2x2 slides came back a few days later. But the ideas that are here, these were scanned from some of those 35 millimeter slides, are things that are still resonating in education. Societies get the best of what they celebrate. I got in real trouble for talking about the multi-billion-dollar engineering feat, the Boston Tunnel, named after a person who can hit a rock with a stick. You know, the Ted Williams Tunnel never made sense to me. Anyway, gracious professionalism was born back then, and that was about having a design problem, a kit of materials, solve the problem with what you got, a hard deadline, but more than that, was based on a celebration and on gracious behavior. Now, the first contests were quite simple, and we learned a lot. But there were a lot of appropriate spirit. We had contests in a tray of sand. That was MIT ashtray sand. That dates things a little bit. And in 1976, Sue Caton's performance in the tug of war video film was one of the early bits of attention being brought to this process. We had contests in water, in a tray of injection molding plastic pellets, lots of creative designs. Students did really interesting things. Lots of people came. We had fire code problems in 26100, too many people in the room. A lot of drama, exciting things, different kinds of contests, support from colleagues, happiness. This video clip was taken from The Harvest, the Discover the World of Science in 1980-ish.
Jenny meets the Deathmobile in round 3.
Set, go.
It's an even match, fast cart versus fast cart. And there's a control problem for Jenny. She can't work loose from the stakes that Woody Flowers put in just to make things a little more difficult. The perfectly controlled Deathmobile walks away with it.
It really bums me out because I know I have a good machine, and I know it's like Megan's. It was a good machine, it had potential, and I've worked on it for tons of 6 weeks, 7 weeks, and I'm really mad at myself because I can't steer.
She got hung up on the post, and I didn't, so I won. And I guess it was luck.
Benji, through to round 4, immediately has trouble spreading his rakes with the delicate winding system. The opposition makes it worse, and it's all over.
I stuffed my rakes around back into my machine, and it all got tangled up. And once that happened, I was dead.
It's no surprise when 2 carts make it to the finals. Brad Waller's Deathmobile against David Cultus's Love Tractor.
Down!
love tractor gets a good first scoop and then pins down the Deathmobile. It could be all over. But the joystick artist breaks out and begins to catch up, fast. And the love tractor reveals a crucial flaw. If it jumps out of alignment, the non-steerable design is helpless. It's so close they need a ball count. It's Brad Waller. By 87 to 75, he is the champion engineer.
The students were fantastic, as usual. A lot of diversity. They were exciting, and I think they were good sports, and they learned a lot. We had lots of winners tonight.
You learn so much about just how to design things. I mean, I know what a 632 screw is exactly now. I mean, you know everything. And you just sort of learn all that kind of stuff that's going to be awesome for when we're real engineers in the field. And we'll know, what's going on. The class is valuable, and the contest is for fun. Yeah, that's how you have to take it.
I think it's probably the best class I've ever taken at MIT, and I've learned so much from it. It makes me want to be an engineer now.
Now, I still know and love a bunch of the students in that particular clip. The woman who mentioned the 632 screw is Megan Smith, who was just recently Obama's Chief Technology Officer of the United States. And I was delighted to attend her induction into the National Academy of Engineering a couple of months ago. So now let me switch. Notice, by the way, that what you heard was not about the details of what they learned. It was about learning that they could do something new and different, and grit and mindset and all those things were really important. So David Wallace, colleague in mechanical engineering in 2009s, and doing absolutely amazing stuff. And I think what is happening in 2009 is a wonderful example of what residential education should be about. So this particular exemplar is a problem too big, a time too short, a budget too small, and a team too large. And therefore, it's interesting. It's 16 to 20 students per team, 13 weeks, $7,500 per team, vague topic, from a vague topic to an alpha prototype in a very short time. The students spend a lot of time with one another. They spend a lot of time in the shop with the technicians and with the faculty. And over an almost more than 20-year period, no team has ever failed, which is really quite amazing. There have been teams that struggled, but no team has ever failed. Now, the presentations now are in Kresge. They're a really big deal. More than 1,000 people attend. And the students do these wonderfully elegant presentations that are production quality that would match any university theater company. Their presentations their products cover a wide range of topics. And one of the things that makes the course interesting is that at the beginning of the semester, the teams are divided into half, and each half team develops their own product in the first half of the semester. Then they get together and work together on one of the two for the rest of the term. That's a simplified version of the story, but that's roughly what happens. That is a very interpersonally sophisticated thing to do. It's complicated, it's not easy. And one of the reasons that 2009 works is it's about uniquely human stuff. So I have 3 little video clips just to illustrate how the course is different than a typical university course. So just introducing the topic for the semester is a little classroom demonstration.
And in 2017, the 2009 team is... I am Product Man.
very different than my undergraduate design courses. And the opening to the finale presentation.
Double, 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 oh, 9. Oh, sí, sabes que ya llevo un rato mirándote. Tengo que bailar contigo hoy. Y vi que tu mirada ya estaba llamándome. Ay, muéstrame el camino que yo voy. Papalago, all the students working down at Papalago. Building, getting, machining, we never follow. Occasional all-nighters so excited for the show. Papalago, when you see us working down at Papalago. Falling as a team, you know we're in the zone.
What is all this comic relief and fancy audiovisual stuff and a rock band as part of the presentation? To me, that's really important, and it's the reason that the students typically celebrate what Dave and the 50 other people that help with the course have done. Because that's what education, residential education is all about. It's about community. It's about being part of something that's big and important. You didn't just hand in your homework and get a grade on it. You knew that you were going to stand up in front of 1,000 people and tens of thousands watching on the web and tell folks and demonstrate what you've done. It's a celebration of critical thinking. So, now let me move outside MIT and talk about something that's very closely related to MIT, what happens here at MIT. Dean Kamen founded the FIRST in 1989. A couple of years later, he and I got together and started the first robotics competition. And we have a convenient running debate about whether FIRST is about education or inspiration. The good news is we're both right because it's about inspired education. And the finale, the World Championship's a big deal. And it's now a big deal. There are millions of alumni. 500,000 students are involved right now. About 140,000 adult mentors. 50,000 plus events this year. 85 countries, 4 levels, 60 million in scholarships, 200 schools, over 3,000 corporate sponsors. And the data associated with FIRST is really encouraging. By the way, 10% of the freshman class at MIT are FIRST alum. So the two big events, last year was in Houston and St. Louis. About 60,000 people show up. This year, it'll be Houston and Detroit. The 4 levels are interesting and diverse. These are first regular junior kids at the White House.
People turn pages in a book.
Well, this is wonderful. So how did you guys figure this out?
I had a brainstorming session. Yeah.
You had a brainstorming session?
Yes.
Are you guys able to slow it down and speed it up? No. So that would require sort of a little bit of an adjustment.
It's a prototype.
It's a prototype.
Yeah.
It's a prototype. Thank you so much, guys. Good job. Group hug. Group hug.
Obama has been so wonderful with FIRST. So when you have kindergarten girls talking about brainstorming sessions and prototypes, yes, some victories. So FIRST Lego League is slightly older kids, slightly bigger robots, more competition-oriented. FIRST Tech Challenge is kind of cubic foot robots that weigh 20, 30 pounds. The events are essentially, literally, sometimes rock concerts. And the FIRST teams build these really amazing robots. And this is a preseason tease video put out by one of the teams. They're trying to spook everybody else, saying, see, our robot does all this clever stuff it's going to have to do in the competition. And if you look at what's going on here, that's a very sophisticated machine. You want to hoist yourself, pick up the lanyard, and go up in about 1/3 of a second. Fire these wiffle balls. The wiffle balls don't behave very well, so getting them to behave that way is not easy. And then by the time you get to the World Championship, you're surrounded by robots that are that good. So critical thinking, you see thousands of solutions to the same problem. That's a very rare thing. And you find out which ones were the right paths to go. Notice in the bottom you can see that the score is nearly tied. They're really competing aggressively. So very exciting stuff. And the students respond in an appropriate way.
The victory, this fight, this game, it's so awesome. I can't believe we won it. It's everything I've worked for the past 6 weeks. I've stayed up late day after day, and it all is coming together now. I'm overwhelmed. It's so amazing.
How how much power and how much passion there is, and just how excited we all are, and just don't give up. Just keep pursuing your passion, whether in STEM, in business, whatever you contribute to your team, it's amazing. First has completely changed my life. I didn't want to go into engineering, and now I do, and I know absolutely that this is what I want to do with my life, and it's so amazing to be part of First.
So, yes, they build really amazing robots, but the biggest prize is not winning the robot part of the competition. The biggest prize is the Chairman's Award. And here's a clip edited out of the Chairman's Award video for last year's winner.
This is Morgantown, in north central West Virginia, the home of Mountaineer Area Robotics. Each year on the WVU campus, Mars designs and constructs a robot named Marvin. But building a robot is only a single step towards our goal, to foster change in our home, West Virginia. This mission, to inspire students in rural areas to pursue their creative and intellectual passions through programs like First Robotics, seemed impossible just 10 years ago, but now we have a solution. Mars expects to see tremendous growth within these programs in the coming years, mirroring our efforts with FLL, which we continue to expand. Mars is now working with the West Virginia School for the Deaf and Blind, West Virginia institutional programs, and within county school curriculum to grow the reach of the statewide robotics program to as many students as possible. Outside of our state, Mars also runs programs such as the Mars Tucker Team Help Desk, a program that allows other FRC teams to receive assistance in mechanical, electrical, and software areas, inside and outside of competitive spaces. Mars is now expanding this program to a national level, training other teams to run their own help desks across the country. The state of West Virginia is changing, and we will never let it stop. We are part of a revolution. We are Mars.
Beats teaching them how to mine coal. So this is clearly post-STEM, uber-STEM, over-the-horizon STEM, much more balanced approach. We need a few generations of gracious professionals. Through that, some wise, uniquely human talents can be expressed. And for the MIT students, are you in the right place? I think yes. After I retired and put some distance between the everyday part of MIT and myself, I think I reasonably concluded that MIT is a reasonably gracious meritocracy. That's pretty good. So use it well, because you need it. Thank you. So there are some microphones. We're recording, so we'd like to be able to hear your questions.
I'm a chemistry grad student. So we've learned a lot today about how to teach, and I've been thinking about how we assess. I don't know how relevant this is, but I've had a few classes where the tests are more based on your problem-solving ability than rote memorization. And I'm wondering, like, I intuitively feel that this is useful for my learning, but I'm wondering if it's generally applicable to, you know, how to be good educators.
So I think, you know, the examples that I've used are special cases, and been lucky enough to be involved in design, so the focus has been on doing active learning, hands-on stuff. My message is, as you're a wise person, move as close to direct involvement, vaguely specified problems as you possibly can. And, you know, when I first started teaching design classes, the role was you walked in and lectured and covered a bunch of codified material. I found that if you just start stretching that model a little bit, it can be very different. So I taught drawing, sketching, visual thinking by having everybody in the class do one, and they handed them in the boxes. So just closing the loop locally, do all those things that Carl talked about this morning, and I'm confident you'll find it much more satisfying, and students will like it too. Make it worth their time to be there. Do something that they could not have gotten without being there.
Exactly. I still remember my plant physiology class where the tests were like, here is an ecosystem with these properties. How would you design an experiment to answer this question? Right. Still remember that years later.
Good. Other questions? Thank you. Sir.
Professor Flores, thank you for the talk. It was awesome. I have a question. One of your slides had Alexa, and the question was, what's the capital of something, or some reference information. I'm wondering how you think about training in terms of outsourcing mental tasks to machines versus using the machines to help us, memorize that kind of stuff more quickly, or what have you.
Sure. That's in your soup, and it's a big deal. And because you're asking the question, you're probably going to develop a good answer. But we've had an evolution. There was a time when you could have a whole profession because you knew some stuff. Knowledge was cloistered. I have it. I will give it to you in exchange for, you're rewarding me. And then it became, what do you do with information in order to be a professional? And then it became, how do you wisely apply that in a creative situation? And then it became, how do you work with others to wisely apply so it keeps becoming more dimensional and complex. And the time when there will be people who live only in understanding the universe, and they will get a Nobel Prize. And there will be people who understand only humans. Yo-Yo Ma does not need to know technology. He is a super, but most of us better have a bell-shaped curve, and we better move it. If you're in one, you need to move it to the other. So I trust that you're going to do a good job of making sure that you shift understanding and pursue things that'll make you even more effective. Thank you.
Can I ask one more question really quick? I'm wondering, you mentioned residential learning and all the benefits associated with that. I'm wondering if you have thoughts on the benefits of distance learning and MOOCs and such.
That book chapter that I wrote entitled New Media Strategies for Educational, New Media Impact on Education Strategies, been too long, was essentially about that. I believe that my argument is that there are certain commodity courses that deserve really well-developed, rich new media materials to support them. AI-supported tutor systems, and we're getting there. Some of the stuff that's happening now is really encouraging. There are seminars, PhD level, current research stuff that's going to be a discussion, somewhat like we're having now, but it can be augmented by having high-definition video from places all over the world, and you heard some discussion this morning about places where that's really beginning to work. So the way that new media can help and the way computer-augmented things can help depends on the topic and where you are. There are large number commodity courses that are mostly codified information. A major part of what's currently in high school is about codified knowledge transfer. And the kids that don't have good teachers probably have another way to get around that now. We can fill that void. So it depends upon what the topic is. Current research seminar stuff, it's not going to be there for a long time, and there's no reason to put it there.
Hi, Woody.
Hi.
I really resonated with the part of your talk about mentoring as something that's really instrumental to residential education. Mentoring is very resource intensive. Can you talk a little bit about how MIT can incentivize that and how we can maybe go out and help drag along those other 12 people to get on the train of mentoring and education?
So, thank you. Hard questions. I don't have answers to them. I trust that a lot of people in this room probably have better answers. But 299 has been interesting because the instructors in 299 are not afraid of outside influence. So 50 people are involved in that course. A whole bunch of them volunteer. I believe that MIT alums want to give back. If you look at FIRST, there's 140,000 adult mentors that have volunteered to help young people learn. So I think there is a pent-up talent pool out there that we need to learn to take advantage of. Often, faculty are nervous or afraid of outside mentorship. I don't think that's necessarily the way it ought to be. I think we can take advantage of spreading it around. And so it takes a village is maybe the short answer. And we need to blur the boundaries of not only when we get educated, but what educational institutions are. So communities of learning, et cetera.
Hi, Woody. My name is Enrique. I'm with Office Open Learning in the Workplace Learning Collaborative. And this is fantastic, the way young people collaborate and find their talents or kind of discover engineering. There's a reality that we're living in, which is kind of really, really bizarre and increasingly bizarre. Although there's some people say the world's become a much better, safer place. You know, we're actually, going in a direction that's not very helpful for a lot of people around the planet. So where do you see that this kind of thinking can become a reality mainstream and not just a nice thing that happens at universities, but real world, life is different outside, business is business, et cetera. Because what I find interesting is that somehow something's broken in the real world and no one seems to kind of get their heads around what is it that is broken, that is fixing, that inhibits thinking like the one we saw in FIRST Robotics, et cetera, to permeate throughout society. So there's a lot of potential, but it's unexploited potential.
So, big question, and I'm not going to pretend that I know the answer, but FIRST is now big. There are literally millions of alumni. Most of the young people that have been through FIRST understand gracious professionalism, although it's not sharply defined, but they understand that notion. I believe that FIRST is one piece of evidence that says if you create an environment in which the right things are celebrated, you get the right things. Now, understand it's scary for somebody to say right things. I'm not claiming that I know what's right, but FIRST celebrates things that there's not much debate about whether they're right or not. It's intellectual intensity, helping one another, hard work, high-tech stuff, helping the community. The things that FIRST teams do for their community are really impressive. So when I say we need several generations of gracious professionals, I'm referencing doing the best I can at trying to help that get propagated through society. And at the beginning, I said, without allegiance to truth, we have very little chance of dragging ourselves out of some of the malaise that we're in right now. And I think nerd epistemology, learning to really think about truth and exercise metacognition, is what I'm saying we need to do. And it ain't going to be easy. Sir.
Hi, my name is Doug Shin, and I'm a grad student in chemistry department. And thank you for the great talk. I was wondering what you think it defines the uniquely human side, where all these big data-based AIs are capable of what used to be thought as uniquely human.
You can probably answer that better than I can. I mean, the book Stumbling on Happiness is a case where a sociologist says that over time, we defined how unique we were because we were the only ones that used tools. Now crows use tools. And he whittled away at, animals do more and more things that we thought were uniquely human. They're in the medical field, there was a time when, anesthesiologist will never be replaced by a machine. Well, there's some anesthesiology systems out there that are doing that. So I'm inviting you, as a wise student of technology, to pay attention to that and make sure you stay ahead of the curve, seeing, you know, if I go down that path and solely that path, then a machine's gonna take that over and I'm gonna be left. So I better learn some other stuff. And that probably means branching out a lot more than you might otherwise be inclined to do. So I trust you're gonna pull it off. We're relying on you.
Hi, like others have said, really awesome talk. You mentioned that as we move forward in the universe, we should be thinking more about design thinking and systems, which is one of the uniquely human approaches that you suggest we should learn. And universities are following suit, but this seems like it's very difficult, or this transition hasn't happened on the preschool to K through the 12 level. And you mentioned as a response to scalability that you should ask for volunteers and to help, but then inside of the pre to 12 community, it's much more closed. Do you see a path forward, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, here again, I have confirmation bias. Junior First Lego League is kindergarten. First Lego League is grade school. First Tech Challenge is high school and middle school. When first started, Dean was adamant that it had to be outside schools because there's no way to penetrate schools. And he was right. Now, those organizations are big enough that schools are pulling them in. So I think the path to change must come, as Carl said earlier today, through wiser application of faculty and administration, the science of learning, but students can push for change and make things happen. And I think parents are going to push on grade schools to shift. So it's taken 27 years to get to the point where you can say that First is rocking these things, but it is happening. And I think the ball is moving in the right direction. So I'm optimistic that once it's started, if you help, we'll make it. Thank you.
Is there a model for classroom change as well, so that we can integrate this into classrooms where they spend most of their time?
Well, my model is that you use automation to get training out of the classroom and replace that with real education. And if you make room, if you export training to machines, then you got a better shot at having some space to do real education in the classroom. One more question?
Yeah, one more short question.
All right. I'm Katie. I'm a grad student in the Technology and Policy program. And I was just wondering if you could open up a little bit more than why you called this talk Nerd Epistemology. Because I definitely got the connotation of how we develop into people who our actions are sort of an exhibit of our knowledge, but also in the talk of like how we're exporting training to machines, why epistemology?
My epistemology doesn't let me understand the question yet. So help me understand. My interpretation of epistemology is how you know what you think you know. And I don't think that the general population ever even asked that question. I grew up in a small town in Louisiana. People believe things, and when you ask them why, they would say, well, you know what they say. And their whole epistemology was, the tribe said this, therefore I believe this. So if you look at belief systems, they're geographic. And I think people who build things that operate in the universe and have learned in that process are probably in a pretty good position to ask questions about truth. And then based on that beautifully causal, absolute stuff, deal with some of the things that the human mind has to deal with. I apologize that I was not able to make that clearer.
No, it's okay. It's good.
Thank you all.
Thank you
Let's
so
go
much,
eat.
Woody.